I feel like science books don't get enough attention, particularly on book 2. And I understand why. Science books at the core are intimidating. It feels like you're going to school, reading a textbook sometimes. I mean, it definitely can feel that way. And even I love some science books that are definitely a little high level in a way that I understand is off-putting. But then there are some books that I think are managed to break that mold sufficiently in a way that are really accessible to a much wider audience. And I think that is what this book does. So this book is unique in some ways. It's a science book, that's a science history book, I suppose you could say, that focuses on the impact that killed the dinosaurs. And it's about helping us understand what happened at impact and then how that affected life, starting from moments before the impact to minutes, to hours, to days, to years, to millions of years after impact. What happened to the Earth, to life, and how did life navigate? And what happened to the life that wasn't able to navigate this brand new world? Hi everyone, I'm Josh. Welcome back to my channel for another review. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Last Days of the Dinosaurs by Riley Black. Obviously there's a lot of work out there, whether it be in book, documentary, or otherwise, that tries to communicate what happened to the dinosaurs. But never have we really gotten a full picture or a story to really weave it all together. And that's what this book is trying to do. Essentially, instead of just communicating to us the bare science of what we know about the dinosaurs and about what happened to the dinosaurs, she tells us instead a story that she's woven together using the science, using some creativity, and using some personal judgment around what we know, what we don't know, to craft essentially a narrative arc. It's like a nonfiction fiction story, fictionalized nonfiction, where she is trying to give us a picture of life through time, before the impact, during the impact, and after it, so we can have a better grasp on what happened to life in the past, and the nature of life in general, to be honest. So the book starts out with an introduction. It's basically just introduces us to the basic idea of the dinosaurs, which I know we understand, but it's more than that. It's about giving us an idea of what the point is of this book. It's about understanding what happened the day that killed the dinosaurs, and what exactly was life like for the dinosaurs leading up to those moments. I think that's really important if you want to understand what happened to dinosaurs, because before we can begin to picture the moments immediately preceding, immediately following the impact, we have to appreciate the type of life that existed beforehand. We all have this picture, I'm sure, from say Jurassic Park. So we start by creating that picture, helping us get an idea of what life was probably like for the dinosaurs that were around then. To be clear, this book is not a holistic review of everything we know about dinosaurs. It's instead trying to create a big picture. It's trying to pluck out examples of what we know about dinosaurs to weave together a story that we can relate to. She's choosing to focus in on individual creatures that we know some things about to sort of create like a small little arc within that story, where we get an introduction to a day in the life of this dinosaur, or a moment in the life of this dinosaur. And in doing so, she's not only communicating certain facts about the animal in a way that I think is surprisingly tricky, in the sense that like she's tricking us into learning when that's never our intent here. It's about hearing the story. So it's like we're here for the story, but we stay for the facts. But on top of that, she's also weaving in facts about the environment, because that's really what we want to understand here. There are a number of things to understand. We have to understand the animal, we have to understand their environment, understand the changes to the environment, and understand how the animal reacts. And I feel like every story that we're getting plugged into is sort of following that sort of arc. We understand the animal, we understand its environment, and we understand how the changes in its environment are forcing it to change, or sadly killing it in the process. And that's how we're sort of going through time here. We start before, and then we have what's happening during the impact. Well, she sort of outlines what we know about the impact, which I feel the impact process itself is probably some of the most sound science, because we have a pretty good understanding of how it happened, or how the impact process happens. Specifically how the one that killed the dinosaurs happened, there is some error bars in that process, but generally speaking, what happens post-impact is, I think, fairly well represented in the book. And in fact, I feel like my own understanding of it was a little bit flawed or limited, because I understood that the impact process killed the dinosaurs because it led to a global cooling. Essentially, you have debris locked up in the atmosphere, and it blocks out light for years, enough to kill off a substantial amount of species, animals and plants. But more than that, What I did not know was that in addition to the debris that sort of blocks out the sun, there's more heavy debris that gets knocked up, travels around the world, and it starts to settle out. And as it's settling out, as the debris is falling through the air, its interaction with the air particles heats up the air particles in the same way that your hand will heat up when you had the friction against the palms. The friction of the air molecules with the particles in the air led to substantial heating. We're talking way too hot for life to thrive. And it was in those moments that would prove to be seriously deadly for a lot of the dinosaurs, especially the big dinosaurs, who weren't able to burrow down in the water or in the ground to survive that temporary heat that was all over the globe. I never knew that's how it happened. I feel like the public have this idea of some massive explosion is killing all of the dinosaurs all at once, as if there was just some huge nuclear explosion that just wiped out all around the world. And it wasn't like that. There was a localized explosion for every impact. But what led to it destroying the dinosaurs on such a global scale is unique to this process in particular. And it's unique to the geology. It's important to understand that the debris that blocks out the sun, the debris that led to the heating of the atmosphere, that temporary heating, had to do with the bedrock, had to do with where the impact hit the earth. It could have hit somewhere else, and the way in which that debris, the bedrock, reacts would have been different. The way in which it interacts with the sunlight would have been different. The fact that this one was so catastrophic was because all the things lined up just perfectly for allowing this to happen. It could have been much worse. It could have been much less worse. And understanding that process, I think, is super fascinating. I think it's something that's told really well here because it is like a story, and that story is really engrossing. And even while I may be an expert in impact processes, I think even those of you who aren't would still find it fascinating, because it is interesting to think how this is what did it. This is what triggered the instances that killed the dinosaurs. Once we get past the impact process, we can then start to understand the moments post it, because the impact process, it's limited obviously, but the effects on life are long term. Because we start off with a momentary heating that could last for minutes or hours, maybe days. I honestly don't remember. It was in a book. But then we propel forward. Basically, we start with moments before. I say moments, days, years maybe. And then the moment of, say a minute after, an hour after, a day after, a year after, 100 years, 1,000 years, a million years. So basically, we're jumping through time, getting a snapshot of what life was doing at this period of time to understand how the impact has still affected the earth. What we see is, of course, is where you have this heating, you have the cooling, and then you have how long it takes for the cooling to level back off. But on top of that, we just have to understand how life sort of dies down, rebounds, and what life rebounds and what just dies out, what branches in the new directions. All those little tiny details, all interwoven into the story in a way that is just super compelling, and I think helps to communicate what happened, all this complex history in such a unique and engrossing way. It's what makes this book unique from other dinosaur stories, because it's able to craft the narrative in a way that, while it may take creative liberties, is able to communicate the science in a way that I think other stories, other attempts just probably aren't capable of doing that. And even each story, each snapshot of time, we're not getting a holistic view of everything that's going on. We're instead getting a picture of one organism or a couple of organisms, where we're focusing in at one part of the earth, and she's crafting a narrative of a day in the life of that one individual, how it's thriving, how it's maybe still limited slightly because of the impact. All these little tiny stories come together to create that bigger arc that I've been talking about. Now, when it comes to the creative liberties, I think they are necessary, right? I mean, as a scientist, I would have loved hearing the facts and then saying, this is what we think happened. But at the same time, I'm not sure it would have been as effective. It made as big of an impression, and if honestly, I would have liked it as much otherwise. Like, if I really wanted to, I could read all the papers, understand all the shit, but I don't have the time or the energy. And that's why I like being able to have this book to do the work for me and create this picture to get a better idea of how life evolved. And even if you are still interested in hearing that science side, which I was, I wanted a bit more science interwoven into the story, which is why I was so surprised when I came to the appendix in this audio work that I've been reviewing, where she basically walks through every chapter and she helps us understand the science that informed her creative choices and why she went in a certain direction. And it's not as if she went with, this is the most popular answer from scientists, so this is what I'm going to assume. Sometimes she makes some, I think, less sound choices. Not necessarily I don't agree with them. More it's about using things that we know a little bit about or limited information about to hint at the possibility to sort of help grow our existing picture of life during dinosaurs and post-dinosaurs. Basically, she's trying to both use what we know and also expand it and introduce other possibilities because of that. We're never going to have a crystal ball to look back and see exactly what happened. But what we do have, I think, is its own very powerful story. At the core of this book is the idea of how life adapts to change. There's that quote that she mentions in the book, life finds a way, and it doesn't always find a way. That's not true. Life is resilient, and some life will adapt. And when one thing dies off due to a changing environment, new life or something new tends to be able to fill its niche. And that arc of the nature of life, for death to lead to creation, is the essential point of the book, I feel like. Even in the conclusion, Dr. Riley Black talks about how her own marriage had to die before she could really come to truth about her own personal story as transgender. It helps us, I think, get a picture of her own passion for the science, but for the history of these dinosaurs and how it relates to her life. And as far as the audio, I think the narrator did a sound job. It was very professional in a way that I guess you'd expect for a nonfiction book, but not to the point that it was very dry and boring. I think she introduced hints of emotion where appropriate, where the lines that are written could be read very dryly as this happened and this happened and this happened to this character, to this thing. But there is, I think, an underlying emotion being written into it that has to really be appreciated. And I think she very subtly works that into the narration in a way that helps keep us grasped, I think, in a way that emotionally grasped, that is, in the arc, to help us appreciate the emotional stakes of what's going on, which I know seems a little weird for a fiction book about dinosaurs dying, but I think there are some emotional stakes. So if you get invested in the story that's being told, and it's as much has to do with the writing as it does the narrator, I think she does a sound job. It's not my favorite of all time, but I have no serious complaints. All in all, those are all my thoughts. I really hope you consider giving this book a go. It came out, I think, April 26th. Again, I'm very grateful to Macmillan Audio for giving me the opportunity to read this book. Riley Black, Dr. Riley Black, wrote a great book, and I really hope she gets more attention. This book gets more attention. Let me know if you're intrigued in reading it, you think you might add to your TBR, or if you have other dinosaur books you think I might enjoy. And as always, thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end, obviously give me a dinosaur emoji. And as always, have a great day, stay safe, and I'll see you all next time.